Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight we have a very dark collection of stories indeed. Be warned that some of these may be triggering, and you should proceed with the utmost caution. In any case, the most triggering story has a trigger warning at the start, and it's at the end, just so you know. But for now, it's time to get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. I had this friend who was really into the occult. Unfortunately, I was the one who got him turned onto it. We had a mutual appreciation of the paranormal and all things weird, so I thought the subject would interest him. He started going deep into the subject, to the point where he wouldn't talk about anything else. He would actually interrupt a conversation and force the subject back to occult matters. Rude. But sometimes people go through phases where their interest is all they really want to talk about. It was a mostly forgivable offense. I think I should mention that this particular friend didn't have a very large friend circle. His depression and introverted nature kept him inside a lot. He didn't have the best of luck in relationships with women. His world was kind of small, and I did enjoy hanging out with him. So I did my best to be a good friend. I didn't want to just brush him off because he was acting a little weirder than normal. Honestly, for the longest time, he was a totally normal guy. We'd chat, play together on the PlayStation, sometimes go and see movies with my boyfriend accompanying us, and we all hung out at the park. We went swimming, and overall had a good time hanging out. Things started to go downhill when he started to smoke DMT. Personally, I think psychedelics are amazing tools that can offer you insight into your life, but they should be treated with respect. My friend got to the point where he was making it himself. Apparently, it's pretty easy to do after a meager amount of research, and he was smoking it daily, multiple times a day. For those of you who are not familiar with the substance, when you smoke it, you get transported to a different world, an entirely new plane of existence. Your body and yourself no longer exist. You're just exploring this alternate reality dreamscape. My personal experience with it led me to see a dragon once in this kaleidoscope of a cornucopia. People see all kinds of different things there, but I digress. Now imagine what that does to a person when they're smoking it 30 plus times a day. He started telling me things like how he was the reincarnated Osiris. He said he was seeing Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the place in waking life. Apparently, he had hour-long conversations with entities in his bedroom, even when he wasn't smoking. Of course, I was very alarmed to hear all of this and told him he needed to take a serious break. No drugs for a few months so he can find solid footing in reality again. At this point, I was still hanging out with him because he obviously needed some help. And like I said, he didn't have a lot of friends that could give him that. He was also the black sheep of the family, so I knew he wasn't getting any support from them. He was really close to his sister, and I did reach out to her on Facebook to express my concerns. I pushed her to talk to him into getting some psychiatric help, because he was slipping past the point of no return. I'm not really sure if she took my messages seriously, since we didn't really know each other. Plus, she was at least 6 years younger than us, and possibly didn't grasp how serious the situation was becoming. In any case, I'll jump forward now to the part where things start to get really creepy. My boyfriend had made arrangements to hang out with our friend at the park. I didn't really want to go because I felt like I needed a break from him and his nonsensical ranting. I couldn't deal with it on that particular day. My boyfriend says he wasn't all that bad, and we went anyway. We get to the park, and he is his usual self, ranting about Egypt and how made-up gods that only he knew the truth about. He also had a large hunting knife that he kept fiddling with the whole time we were on our walk. He told us that he had been using it in ceremonial magic and that it helped to banish negative thoughts. It made me extremely uneasy. He would do this thing where he would take the knife and make stabbing motions near his heart or head, like he was mock stabbing himself, all while holding a conversation with me or my boyfriend. I think we're both really on edge, and I didn't know what to say or do about it. I tried to distract him from doing it by bringing up other subjects that may interest him, but he kept on with his ritual. Keep in mind, we're walking on a trail, so it's not like we could say goodbye there and then. We had to walk back to our car and drop him off at his car. My boyfriend then had the bright idea that we should get some lunch after our walk, even though I was doing my best to give him a look that said, "No, you crazy son of a, why do you think I want to spend more time with this nut?" But it must not have been very effective, or my boyfriend was ignoring it. Either way, we ended up getting in the car to get lunch. In the car, I was driving and my boyfriend was in the passenger seat, and our weirdo friend was in the back. As we're heading through a busy part of town where all the shopping and restaurants are, I hear the distinctive sound of a belt buckle coming undone. Then I hear the worst sound imaginable. I peek back out of the corner of my eye, and my suspicions were confirmed. This crazy nut was full-on jacking off in our back seat. I mean pants all the way down, bare ass, everything, beating it so hard it was almost like he wanted to tear it off. Instantly I felt sick to my stomach, and all the nervous energy I had throughout the day popped into my head. I was trying not to shake, and trying to ignore it and drive through heavy traffic. I kind of have a freeze response, I guess. The whole time I kept thinking about that huge-ass knife he had in his pocket, and obviously he was completely off his rocker now. I was afraid to say anything or confront him, because I didn't know how he was going to react. This part is nuts. But my boyfriend didn't seem to notice, and the whole time he kept on rambling about God knows what. I couldn't listen because my thoughts were 100% focused on driving and trying to act like I didn't know what was in my back seat. We get to the restaurant, and my boyfriend runs inside to grab food, and I am the only one left alone in the car with our friend, and try to act like I'm browsing on my phone, when really, I'm watching and listening as hard as I can. We don't talk. My boyfriend gets back, and I complain that I'm tired, and that it had been a long day, and to just drop him off. So I drive us back to our friend's car, and he doesn't get out of the vehicle. He just sits there. I have to get a little bit rude and ask him to please get out and go home. He exits the car and walks over to his passenger side. I start getting really scared, and I suspected the worst. He pulled a gun out of some kind of bag he had on the seat and just walks over to our car with it. I don't know why I did this, but I was so pissed I got out of my car and walked right up to him. I was maybe 3 feet away and could see it was a loaded 9mm. I kept asking him over and over, "What are you doing?" Because apparently that's all my brain could do. I told him to get in his car and go home. He never said anything this whole time, just kind of cried and had this weird look in his eye. For whatever reason, he did eventually get back into the car and drive off, and I told my boyfriend that we are never hanging out with him again, and that I don't want to talk to him or see him anymore. No contact. Nada. A few months passed, and he occasionally messages me through the PlayStation or texts my phone. He says a lot of random stuff and I ignore it. It turns out he moved down to Tennessee near Nashville. I don't know why. He had a roommate and I think their girlfriend lived there? I'm not too sure on the situation. I think maybe he's turning his life around and getting a fresh start down there, and I think it's best to cut all contact with him and let him regroup. I'm not interested in any kind of friendship with him, and I know he needs help beyond anything that I could offer. But again, I reach out to his sister and let her know that he had a gun. She managed to get it from him somehow, but it did little good in the end. I get a call about 11 p.m. one night that wakes me up. It's a man claiming he's a detective down in Gallatin, Tennessee. and my heart skips a beat. I start sweating and immediately ask what happened. Apparently, my former friend stabbed someone to death on Halloween Day. I don't know all the details, and the articles about it are kind of sparse. The whole thing is kind of surreal, and I'm just left feeling like I'm lucky that I didn't get shot last summer. I still feel creeped out and sick by the whole ordeal. I am a 23-year-old Italian male, living in a not-so-small town in southern Italy. Now, it's not the most secure town in the world. In fact, we have a long history of micro-criminality connected to the local mafia, but if you're smart, you keep yourself out of trouble. I need to explain my daily commute and context first to make things better to understand. I live in the old part of town, as here it's very common for every town to be built around its antique part. And after around 1980, earthquakes destroyed a good part of it, so it's very affordable to live here. And some parts are beautiful and well kept, where others aren't, so you find good families and great folks sharing spaces with more pesky dudes. Doesn't help that the town's castle has been converted into a prison. Yes, what the hell, Italy. Luckily only for minor offenders. Now, for the encounter itself, this happened in January. I just came back from uni. It's a 20-minute drive in the car, but with awful public transport, it takes anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to get home. And I like to study in the library until it closes at 6:30. And I usually get home at 8 p.m. or later, and I'm greeted by my dog, Maya. She's a 1-year-old lab, and I take her for a walk around this part of town and the castle, since it's her favourite spot to meet other street dogs. She was taking longer than usual to do her business, and it was freezing, and I was wearing clothes a little bit lighter than I should. Plus it was snowing, which is super rare here. Maya saw snow and was very excited. It was at that point I decided to walk back home and grab a jacket, to better take delight of the occasion. And on my walk home, I cut through and past this abandoned building under construction. It was just the pillars and floor done, but a lot of kids used to play and climb around it. I was just taking the shortcut when I see this guy standing there with his back facing me, still as a rock, with his head facing up to the first floor of the abandoned building, wearing a dirty beanie, heavy winter jacket and a tracksuit far too wide for his build. And there he was. At first I was frozen in spot, but it wasn't an extraordinary encounter, since there are a lot of weird people around here. And I decided to pass on, but the first red flag was when I watched Maya, and she had her back fur raised and was looking at this guy dead. She never did this, and as we walked, she kept this odd behavior up. I realized I'd never seen him around these parts, and I knew he wasn't local. His face was creepy, greasy hair, a 3-day beard, and he extended his hand to Maya. Stupidly, that calmed her down a bit. Maybe he was just mentally ill walking around. But anyway, there's a dormitory for mentally ill people not too far from here. But when he was trying to pet my dog, I hear something moving on the first floor. I thought it may have been a cat, but Maya would have already been jumping around if she had smelt it. I looked around and see this little girl of about 10 years old, who had fear in her eyes, really desperate. And I'm not exaggerating the detail. She had a familiar face though. Must have been one of the kids that played around this building. She must have seen me walking my dog around, because as soon as she recognized me, or my dog, she caught eyes with me and whispered, "Help," with her lips. After this, I turned my head around, and the creeper's watching me now. I'd like to say he had the usual creepy smile, but he didn't. He was just wearing a very serious face with dead eyes. I don't know what to do. I'm 6'2", and kind of imposing, but I've never fought anyone, and I'm generally just a peaceful guy. In a fraction of a second, this guy looks up and says, "Calm down, sweetie. We need to get home before the food will get cold." Yeah, 10 out of 10. Totally believable, mate. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" I ask. "I'm her uncle. "I need to get her home to eat," he says with the most serious look on her face. I was thinking what to answer to use as an excuse to bring her down and get her to safety, and being the sarcastic, bitchy type in this situation, I say, "That's strange, because I'm her uncle. This doesn't add up." At this point, the little girl has the brilliance to lean off and says, "Hey uncle, can you help me get home? Mummy will be worried." Now this guy didn't seem too threatening at the time, just kind of creepy. So I go onto the building and take the little girl, and as I prepare to grab Maya, she first growls at him and then barks. Now she usually barks this really high-pitched bark, but this time with this guy it was really low-pitched and even scared me. To that I turn around to see this guy with a hand behind his back, reaching for something. Oh crap, I think. I'm not a good fighter, and if this guy had a knife, it's going to end badly. He stops his reaching motion as the bark is now continuous, and in the heat of the moment the little girl leaned off, and I grabbed her with one arm, the other one keeping Maya at bay as a deterrent, and while she was descending I asked her if she had a phone. "No, I don't." I could tell she was on the brink of tears. As soon as she touched the ground, I unlocked my phone and gave it to her. She took the phone and immediately legged it. I should have been glad to, but my immediate thought was, if she did this all to steal my phone, I would have been deadly pissed. After all, it wouldn't have been unusual, but I basically asked her to take it, so it wouldn't have been impossible to think. Anyway, the girl was gone. I turn around and this dude has a knife out. Not a pocket knife. One of those huge kitchen knives that you used to cut bakery bread with. And me being so careless in the kitchen, I know how damn sharp those things can be. So I decide to run away too, but Maya decided nope, I wanted to stand here barking at him. And I couldn't manage to pull her away, as she's almost a 30-kilogram dog. But this was a grip too strong for even her. So we were there stalling and this guy starts swinging the knife in the air. I want to run. If I leave the dog, I know she'll end up really bad, and even if I manage to pull her, he could run after us. And there we were, him swinging the knife with empty eyes and my dog barking, and me crapping myself not knowing what to do, and to make everything worse, my hands were freezing cold for not wearing gloves, and the grip leash was really starting to hurt. The thing that still surprised me in the situation is the fact that I am absolutely sure that people around the block could hear us. Not a single one decided to take a look. Anyway, after what seemed like a long time but was probably about 2 minutes, I hear heavy footsteps from the street I came from, and a lot of people show up, probably her dad and some of her relatives and friends with a baseball bat. This is not going to end well, I thought. As soon as the creepy guy saw those men, he threw the knife in my direction, with terrible aim, but still I had to move not to get hit, and started to run to me, trying to go into the street in my direction. I didn't even try to block him because I was still frozen by the knife undertow, but Maya bit his leg, ripping a piece of his tracksuit off. I still have it, she's so proud of it, and is now one of her favorite toys. But the dude didn't even care and ran for his life, with some of the girl's supposed relatives behind him. He eventually managed to get them off, but the girl's father came to me. I thought to thank me, but instead he screamed, "Who the hell was that?" while waving his bat menacingly. I looked at the girl, telling him to calm down, but he only got more pissed until the girl ran up to him, telling him that I had helped her and gave me my phone back. After that he calmed down and thanked me for helping his girl and offered me to grab a coffee at his house. I politely refused and went home, deciding that was enough adventures for one night, and I was still tired as hell from uni, and slept it off. The next morning the police rang my doorbell to take my statement, as the guy managed to run off and showed me a book with all the signaled photos, ID and stuff, but nothing came out of it. He probably wasn't even from a nearby town. You could tell from his dialect and accent. It has a slight variation from town to town, and that was the end of it. I surely did not do the best I could have, but I'm glad I still got to help out the little girl. I don't know what would have happened to her if someone hadn't have shown up. So creepy wannabe uncle? Let's not meet. This story happened to me and my girlfriend, now fiancé. To give you some context, she and I met online in 2015 and fell in love. We communicated via Skype for 3 years because we lived in separate countries, until I came to live with her in February of 2018. So a few weeks or so before I flew to meet her, she had made friends with a group of guys in her hometown, and I got to meet them shortly after living with her. They ranged in age from 16 to 18 and would come to visit us often because we lived close to the high school they attended. At first, I found it a bit weird that they would always come over and take up so much of our time, but they turned out to be really good friends over time. One of them even agreed to be one of my groomsmen recently. But back then, there was always one in particular that bugged me. Dan. As I mentioned earlier, the guys would come and visit and hang out with us a lot, but Dan was the one that would always take up most of our time. I say this in the sense that he would message us early almost every day asking if we were home and if he could come over, and would proceed to spend the entire day from morning to night, or early afternoon to night, depending on his work schedule, at our place. He would also go out of his way to meet us and bump into us wherever we went, whether it be the store, the coffee shop, or any other place you can think of. While I found this annoying, there wasn't anything particularly creepy or weird going on yet. Mind you, we live in a small town where it's almost impossible to not run into someone you know on the way to buy groceries or something. Plus, I had only known him for as long as my fiancée had known him, which wasn't a very long time, so I thought. I was maybe judging him too harshly. Also, he was in a long-distance relationship himself with a girl from another country who he was hoping to meet in real life, just like me. So I could at least relate to him in that aspect, and decided to let it slide, but made a note to keep an eye out for him for any suspicious behavior. The problem seemed to start once he started trying to incorporate himself into other aspects of our life. He would make friends with anyone we'd been friends with for a long time, tag along with us whenever we were going to meet up with said friends, even though he hadn't been invited, hang out with them without us knowing, etc. And my favourite instance, and the one that made me become more suspicious with him, was one time when we were going to hang out with some long-time friends of my fiancée. As the friend had finished her shift, and we were getting ready to get into her car to drive over to her place, Dan suddenly shows up and joins us to their place uninvited. It was just so off-putting that he would just invite himself without our friends or even our consent. Then, when we were done there and walking home, the three of us passed his house. We lived further away at the time and assumed he'd go home, but nope. He kept tagging along with us with the excuse that he needed to buy something at the store, which was bull, since the stores had all been closed for well over an hour at this point, and he knew it. So he just kept walking with us until at one point, when we were almost home, we put our foot down and told him that we were tired and just wanted to go to sleep as soon as we got home, and told him to go home. It took us nearly 10 minutes, and 10 minutes can be quite a long time to just convince him, during which he would react to our request with awkward and creepy silences, until he finally headed home annoyed. My fiancée, concerned that she'd offended him, asked if he wanted to hang out with us later in the week. What follows was various weeks of him coming over to our place, staying until late at night, and him slowly leaving more and more of his stuff at our place so he'd have an excuse to come over. I kid you not. He brought over his PS3 with a bag of 30 or so games which stayed there for 3 months. It got to the point where people thought he'd moved in with us. He also seemed to have problems with our friends. Amongst other things, he would get into arguments with our friends and told one friend who was goofing around at our place that he'd kill him if he didn't shut up. He lied to us and made us believe that 2 good friends of ours wanted to report us to the police for drugging our friends. I mentioned earlier that some of them were 16 at the time, and he allegedly hit one of our friends' girlfriends once, although this was never confirmed, but I have no reason to believe it was a lie. It's like he wanted us all to himself, and to isolate us from our friends. The last thing he did, which ended up being the key to us getting rid of him forever, was that he started dating my fiance's cousin, MJ. He broke up with his long-distance girlfriend under suspicious circumstances and started dating her. As a result, whenever MJ came to visit, Dan would always come along too. My fiancé wanted to hang out with MJ. There was Dan, even when he was dating someone else. His obsession with us never ended. One day when we were in town, we met another friend of ours, and Dan insisted that we hang out with the guy all day when we'd arranged to do something else. When we refused, he and MJ ditched us to be with him, and that was when we'd had enough. We got into a huge fight later that day in the park, with some of our friends as witnesses, and told him off, telling him we wanted nothing more to do with him anymore, and to pack up his stuff and never show his face at our place again. This unfortunately resulted in my fiancé and MJ not talking to each other for a long time. We had to move a few times since then, the most recent being February of last year, and we never saw him again and blocked him on all our social media and blocked him out of our lives. We know from friends that he tried a few times to ask around where we live, but our friends always have our backs. MJ and my fiancé recently made up after she dumped him, and now that the sour taste he left behind is for the most part gone, it goes without saying that we never want to see him again. Just such a toxic person. Let me take you back to winter 3 years ago, and a college friend of my father's reached out to ask how we've been, and if we would like to go skiing with her family. They told us that we could live in their secondary apartment and eat with them, which meant that a holiday would have been much more affordable, so we just went for it. When we arrived to her village, my dad's creepy school friend seemed to have changed plans. She didn't bring her family and just joined us to get to the village where we all needed to go skiing, but just for grocery shopping. The day was very nice. My father and I had fun, tried to beat our speed records which we recorded, ate fast food in a restaurant, and at about 5, went back to the house and ate dinner with her and her child. I really liked her child and thought we could become friends. After dinner, she showed us the apartment where we would sleep. As soon as we entered, we noticed that the humidity inside the apartment was very high. It felt like we'd just entered the tropics, just hot and wet, and it smelled. Not particularly bad, but like they'd used tons of cleaning supplies and chemicals. Also, she warned us not to touch any of the big carton boxes in the bathroom, as she was doing some experiments, but what she was doing was never mentioned. While searching for duvet covers and blankets, we also discovered a small door. Behind it we just saw darkness and didn't know where it led, but it was late and we wanted to sleep, so we didn't inspect the shaft or whatever it was. I read something and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. I had the feeling that something was off, but I shrugged it off, thinking I saw too many horror stories, and after an hour, I noticed my dad couldn't sleep either, just tossing and turning. I told him, and I can quote and translate word for word, I just got a weird feeling. Something's off here, but I kind of feel dumb for being scared. My dad answered, yeah, I got a weird feeling too, but I also just shrugged it off. We talked a bit about the insulation and feeling, and that they shouldn't be ignored, and it was at that point that we decided to get the hell out of there. A few days later, a female in that area was arrested for murdering her husband, and even though I can't 100% confirm that she was the woman arrested, I'd like to think it probably was. Some time passed, and I asked my dad about it a while later. He told me that the creepy school friend was arrested not for murder, but actually dealing drugs. At the apartment, she was growing some sort of drugs that had to be grown at a certain temperature. So that made sense, and the smell of cleaning supplies was easy to explain. She wanted to ensure that we couldn't smell anything. It's good to know that we weren't in a life-threatening situation, but nonetheless, it really gave me the willies being there. This happened about 2 years ago. Before I begin, I want to address this situation may be triggering to some viewers, as it's slightly graphic and may be upsetting to those who have experienced sexual abuse. I'm sharing this encounter to serve as wisdom, to always listen to your instincts and to stop ignoring the bad in others. I've been the type to overlook the bad and focus on the good, or even to make excuses for shady behavior. Doing so has put me in some dangerous situations. You are not a bad or judgmental person for noticing shady behavior and to choose to walk away from it. It is so important to be open to others' dark side, to protect yourself. Here's what happened. I was living in Tacoma, Washington at the time in my late 20s. I'm 30 now. Tacoma is not a safe city, and it was very challenging to make friends and meet anyone because of the crime, and also being a reserved person. Basically, I'm not the most forthcoming at social interactions. I was recommended a group on Facebook that was called something along the lines of Introvert and Extrovert Social Singles. After only being in the group for a few days, an older man named Sean had started messaging me. He was a bit high energy and said he had ADD, so I figured that's why he was so pushy to talk so much, and right away wanted to talk on the phone. We talked about a lot of different subjects, and he seemed very outgoing and direct. Over the course of the phone call, he had mentioned some other women he met in the group and how they'd hooked up. I made it very clear that I am not the hookup type, and that I was only interested in having friends. This was stressed a few times. For one, I was in no way attracted to Sean romantically. He was much older than me, had a child and strings with his ex, and I didn't want to be involved in that. However, some men just can't seem to understand that no really means no. During the course of the few hours we spoke, judging by what he said, the word rape kept springing forth. I kept getting images of being sexually assaulted, not particularly by him at the time, and I didn't feel an instinctual bad feeling, and I just chalked up the images as paranoia, as I have experienced abuse growing up, and at the time, I felt a bit paranoid being alone with men, so I figured that was where things were coming from. Needless to say, that belief was incorrect. After talking for several hours, Sean wanted to meet in person. He mentioned how he only lived about a half hour away, and asked to grab dinner and go to the beach. At first, I said no. I mean, we had only been talking for a day and a half. This was all pretty sudden for me, but he pushed, and oh man was he slick. At the time I was living with my mum, which he knew about. He told me he wouldn't try anything and that he's not like that. He had a daughter, and that he wouldn't do anything to me that he wouldn't want someone doing to his own child. He told me he was an empath, and that he could feel so deeply for other people, blah blah blah, and even told me to have my mum meet him. She could take down his phone number, his license plate, anything that would prove he wasn't a creep. You'd think the fact that he would be so pushy to prove he wasn't a creep, that I would have digressed, but he was so damn pushy, and I told myself to give him a chance, and made all sorts of excuses to go. I was smart though. I met him at the mailboxes in front of the apartment complex instead of meeting me directly at my place. He met my mum. He even told her the nonsense he told me about how he wouldn't try anything and how he has a daughter too. So we went to a nearby deli, grabbed some dinner and drinks, and headed to the beach. In person, he was very different in demeanor than over the phone. He was much more quiet, and seemed like a different person. I mean, he looked the same as his pictures, but it was like a different person flicked on. Before we got out of his car, he pulled out some buds for us to smoke. I'm no stranger to the green, so I wasn't concerned about getting high with someone. I didn't know that then, but in retrospect I realized he did this for me to be a bit more manipulated later. We had our dinner, and when we were finished eating, he wanted to walk around. It was so awkward, he barely spoke, even when I tried to make conversation. It was just uncomfortable. He had talked so much over the phone that he interrupted me, and now he's super quiet, and seemed to know his way around the beach pretty well for someone who claimed they hadn't been to Tacoma very much. Alongside the beach, there's this hill that leads up to a forested area that overlooks it. He had us walk up there and straight away went to a specific bench I didn't even know about in the area and sat down. He pulled out a joint again, and we talked some more, just chilling and staring at the beach. Now here's where things started going south. He started rubbing the back of his head and neck, and told me how these areas were really tense and sore, and proceeded to ask me if I would massage them for him. I went quiet, thinking to myself, "Are you serious?" While paused, unsure of what to say. "What? It's not a big deal. It's just hard for me to massage myself. It's easier if someone does it for me. I'm not trying anything, it's just really sore, don't overthink it." I felt super awkward and hesitated, but again, he told me not to overthink it. It's not a big deal. And being pretty high, I was doing my best to stick with a just be cool kind of mode, so I uncomfortably agreed. I got up and quickly massaged his neck a few times, and sat back down on the other side of the bench as quickly as possible. A minute or two goes by in silence when he complains again and asks for me to massage a little longer. I breathe a heavy sigh, hoping he'd get the point that I didn't want to do this, especially given he claims he's an empath, and I was irritated he wasn't picking up on the vibes of me being uncomfortable. I told myself, okay, he bought you dinner. He shared his weed. The least you can do is give him a small massage, no big deal. So again, I gave him a quick, short massage and sat back down. Now allow me to mention I was in no way wearing anything revealing nor suggestive. I had on skinny jeans, a shirt, and a jean jacket. When I sat back down, he put his hand on my back. Oh God, what is he doing, I thought. I kept telling myself to be cool and not overthink it. Maybe he was just trying to be nice. He started massaging my lower back. I moved over to silently tell him to stop doing it, but that didn't work. He put his hand down my bare back and slipped his hand under my shirt and began massaging my bare skin. I immediately got up from the bench and began walking towards the edge of the forest hill. Internally, I was racing. I didn't have my mum, my car, or anyone else nearby to pick me up. I was super high, experiencing a war inside of myself, questioning if I'm being paranoid or if he's just being a pervert. I didn't know what to do. I felt scared and trapped, but kept telling myself I was overthinking the situation. I made excuses again and tried to play it cool. I should have just ordered an Uber or something and gone home, but I was worried about the cost, and honestly, I just truly believed to some degree that maybe I was judging him or just overthinking the situation. He eventually emerged from the bench and addressed me to follow him down to the forested area further. I'd like to say the bench incident was the end of it, but it was merely the beginning. He finds a little dirt ledge facing a really nice spot to the ocean and sits down. I stood there though. I didn't want to be next to him at this point, doing my best to keep some sort of distance between us when he asks me to sit down. I'd like to add, one of the reasons I felt so intimidated is that Sean is huge. I mean, he's at least 6'1" or 2", heavy built, while I'm a 5'7" and lack upper body strength. I hesitated to sit down, but eventually did a good distance from him. He moved closer to me and oh my God, he laid his head on my upper leg, then tells me he has a headache and he'd like me to give him a head massage. I finally plucked up the courage and said, "I don't feel comfortable doing that." My voice was nearly shaking, and I was close to feeling paralyzed. He looked up at me and just said, "We're friends. It's not a big deal. It's platonic. Stop making a big deal out of it." I still feel uncomfortable and a bit frozen. I guess he took notice and gave me a lecture about how he's comfortable with me, how he gives me massages and receives them from his friends. Basically made me feel like I was abnormal for feeling uncomfortable about this. So I hesitated and proceeded to do what he asked. After a minute or two, I made some excuse that my legs hurt and that I needed to get up. He got up with me and started leading us back to the beach area. I started feeling relieved now that we were around other people and in public when he stopped me, pulled out his phone and took a picture of me. I found this even more strange, and he goes on this rant about how he wanted to show his other empath friends what I looked like. Why? Just why? He went on about how all his friends are empaths and how they all care so much for each other, and I guess he wanted his friend to read me. So strange. So uncomfortable. We returned to his car. He turned on some music and offered me another smoke. I thought because we were in public now that things would be okay despite how awkward it had been. I did what I could to make a weird situation the best I could, and I won't lie, he had decent taste in music. All started going fairly well at this point. He was talking a little more and it wasn't feeling very awkward, and I was enjoying the high. By the area we were parked at, there was some train tracks, and a very loud train going by shook the car. Not so good when you're stoned. So we both wanted to leave. He wanted to hang out more and I wanted to go home, and we ended up talking about going to a park that was near where I lived to just finish the joint. It was beginning to get dark, but I thought it wouldn't be a big deal to finish the joint and then go home, as things seemed to be more chill now. I know you're probably thinking that I'm an idiot, and I was. I know, you're right. I was being a super idiot. While we attempted to get to the park, I swear to God he pretended to not know where to go. I gave him precise and easy to follow directions, but he just couldn't find his way. By this time it was night out, and he was driving and pretending to be lost, and he asked if I'd rather just go to his house and spend the night. No. I told him no, and that I'd rather just go home. It's dark, and all the feelings that had dissipated earlier of feeling uncomfortable just increased by 10. Instead of taking me home, he pulled over on some dark residential area where there wasn't even a street light, and now was very uncomfortable. We weren't very far from where I lived, and there was a Fred Meyer grocery store in view, so I figured I could run to the store to grab help. I did my best to play out what happened next as calmly as I could. When he pulled over and turned off his car, he told me he needed a break from driving, that he was super tired now and wanted to take a 5-minute nap before driving me home. We were about a mile from where I lived. This was shady. I put my hand on the handle of the car, prepared to jump out at any moment, when I realized all the doors were locked. It was at this point I was in full panic mode. I didn't realize he had locked the doors, and though most people do in a moving car, it just increased the feeling of "oh crap" in me. He reclines his seat back and closes his eyes and proceeds to put his hands on my shoulder. My stomach drops. I'm fighting back tears, not sure what to do, so I pulled out my phone on the other side of me to where he couldn't see and texted my mum, telling her I needed her to call me immediately with some fake emergency to get home and that I was in danger. My mum didn't answer right away. Next thing I know, Sean is rubbing down my arm, and I look over to see he's got a semi. He says, in a tired voice, "Would you rub my leg the way you rub my neck at the beach?" Attempting to not cry, I used as much assertiveness in my voice as I could to say, "No, I don't feel comfortable doing that." He kept rubbing my shoulder, and now was making subtle moaning sounds. I felt frozen. I was just about as used to as much adrenaline as I could handle to open the car and run like there was no tomorrow, when finally my mum called with the fake emergency. I pretended to be distressed and played it out convincingly, but I swear something in me could tell I knew he was lying. He was really hesitant to take me home at first, because I had assured my mum I'd be home within a few minutes and told her exactly where we were. This seemed to be enough to get him to comply. Blessed from the gods, he agreed to take me home. I was so scared he'd figure out I was lying and trying to do something else, but as he followed through and dropped me off where we'd met, as I was getting out of the car he said we should do this again sometime. And with all the strength I could muster and a fake smile, I just said, "Yeah, sure," and walked in a different direction to the complex than where I actually lived to throw him off. As soon as I got inside, the first thing I said to my mom was that I needed a shower. She was so concerned and thought he actually succeeded in doing something worse, but I assured her he had not. I explained what had happened, and then I texted him something along the lines of, "I knew what you were trying to do, perv. How dare you use your own daughter as a way to manipulate others," and said other profanities before blocking him on everything, and alerted 2 admins within the group about the situation, and they blocked him. I left the group after that. However, the situation devastated me intensely, as it reminded me of the unresolved trauma from my childhood and teen years. I had to get out of town to get some air. I'm sorry this was so long, but I sincerely hope it serves as a lesson to others to not be trusting and to listen to your own feeling no matter how convincing someone is. Things could have ended up worse. I moved from that area and actually feel safe about the publicity sharing this experience now. And to Sean, the manipulating pervert, may you get what you dish out, and let's never meet again. Good evening all and welcome. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. It was fun. The good old Let's Not Meet. Thank you for everyone who voted in the poll. I saw your comments, don't worry. Many of you wanted a paranormal theme or a woods theme, and yeah, they will come. They will come soon enough. Still need to find a few more paranormal stories. In any case, guys, if you like the video, please be sure to express your like by liking and commenting and stuff. Remember that we do post 3 times a week, and on Saturdays we have a compilation, so that's 4 videos a week. And YouTube is still screwing me over by judging my metrics on the comps, not the regular videos, so that's fun. Gonna have to try and find a solution for that. Alright then guys, huge thanks as always to my members and patrons, names on screen. You guys are amazing, I love you forever, and yeah, you guys are just seriously the best. Thank you so much, it means a lot supporting the channel. Okay then, well, that's it from me. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.